Welcome to the Practice Brave podcast. I am the host, Brianna Battles, founder of Pregnancy and Postpartum Athleticism and CEO of Everyday Battles. I'm a career strength and conditioning coach, entrepreneur, mom of 2 wild little boys, and a lifelong athlete. I believe that athleticism does not end when motherhood begins, and this podcast is dedicated to coaching you by providing meaningful conversations, insights, and interview topics related to fitness, mindset, parenting, and of course, all the nuances of pregnancy and postpartum. From expert interviews to engaging conversations and reflections, this podcast is your trustworthy, relatable resource for learning how to practice brave through every season in your life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Practice Brave podcast. Today I'm here with Kayleigh Summers, and we're going to be talking about birth trauma. And I realize that this is not always a conversation that is easy to listen to if you are pregnant or if you experience birth trauma. But I can assure you it's an important conversation that is worth acknowledging, that is worth having. In particular, if you are a fitness or birth professional, you work with women who are mothers, it is critical that you hear stories like Kayleigh's and you recognize that birth looks different for every woman. And I think so many of us that listen to this podcast have athletic backgrounds. Fitness is a big part of your life and identity. And oftentimes when you enter the motherhood season, it's easy to assume that you're strong, you're fit, you're tough, and that somehow that guarantees a certain outcome. And what we're going to discuss today is there's just a variety of variables that influence birth and why it's really important that we keep an open mind if you are entering that season of life. And more importantly, if you are a practitioner supporting women, a coach practitioner in any field, you have to understand the variety of experiences and really dial in how you speak and what you recommend to this population. So Kayleigh, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation today.
Me too. And I've been following you for a long time. And I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I wish I would have had an account like yours when I had first had my son, Cade, 12 years ago, because I don't even think I had the word birth trauma to label what my birth experience had been like. And so I really am grateful for the work that you do.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's been, a long road, but one that, of course, I am grateful to be here and be able to provide support in this way. And it's like healing for me too, to get to be a part of that community.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. So tell us a little bit of your background prior to becoming a mom.
Yeah. So prior to becoming a mom, my gosh, it feels like a different lifetime. Yeah. So I'm originally from South Jersey. And if you know about Jersey, it's very important because South Jersey is an entirely different place than North Jersey. And Central Jersey, some people believe it exists, some people believe it doesn't. So I'm from South Jersey, which is essentially right outside Philly. And I grew up playing soccer. And I eventually went and played Division I soccer at St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. And then I went on from there to grad school at University of Pennsylvania, again in Philly. Really a Philly girl at heart, never left. And I went to grad school to get my master's in social work. And then I worked at the University of Pennsylvania for a while, working in their alcohol and drug program, supporting students in that way. And then I ended up going to work at a boarding school as a therapist to support high achieving kiddos, lots of anxiety, lots of OCD, lots of pressure in those environments. And so it was a really unique situation because I lived there with my husband. He also worked there and we were dorm parents. So we lived in a sophomore girls dorm, and that's where we ended up getting married and having our son. So that's really what, led up to here. I've been incredibly active my entire life. Fitness has always been really important to me. And I had a few instances during college that were incredibly difficult and really tested me in a lot of ways. I tore my ACL my junior year and had to redshirt and stay an extra year. And then I ended up having to actually stop playing soccer. My redshirt season, my fifth year, because of post-concussion syndrome. And so a lot of kind of trials and tribulations through that experience. And I kind of feel like that was enough of like those experiences, they taught me to be tough. I learned my lesson. I made my way through. Little did I know, a lot more was to come.
Yeah, life be like that sometimes, huh?
It
Just
really does.
delivering us. I would say, like, why do I have to learn everything the hard way? Why does every
Totally.
like good thing have to come out of something so hard and so
Yeah.
challenging and so heartbreaking? And I know that's a theme that I've experienced over and over, and I hear that echoed similarly. But tell me a little bit about your pregnancy. So obviously, fitness has been a big part of your life, your whole life, and then you became pregnant. Tell me what your pregnancy was like.
Yeah. So my pregnancy overall was pretty uncomplicated. I was healthy throughout. My only concern, and people always laugh at this, was that I had a very large baby. Typically, this is like the opposite. Like people will be told by their doctor they have a big baby, and like you hear those stories about getting pressured into inductions and things because of big babies on ultrasounds. Mine was the opposite. I was like measuring right on track. Nope, doesn't seem like that big of a baby. Seems just like a normal size. And I was like, I feel like he's huge. But anyway, I gained a lot of weight with my pregnancy, which I was okay with. Because I was active, I was still like super mobile, even though I was like massive. Like, spoiler alert, my baby was born at 10 pounds, 14 ounces. So almost an 11-pound baby. And I was, we moved in 2 weeks before I delivered, and I was like up and down the stairs with boxes and just kind of trying to say I felt good enough to still be super mobile at the end of my pregnancy. And I really didn't have, again, many complications, just a little bit of anxiety about how the birth would go.
Yeah. And that's all fair, all common. I was also team big baby and
Mm-hmm.
very huge, despite having like a really, fit pregnancy and
Mm-hmm.
background. And I think that, like, again, there's like a lot of opinions that circulate about that. And almost like, are you just eating like shit all the time? And what are you doing? Why are you so big? But there's just, again, variables that we cannot always control.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got asked a lot if I had gestational diabetes, which again is not something that's caused by like poor eating, or it's just like something that happens related to the placenta, but it was still kind of like, "Oh, you had such a big baby. Did you have gestational diabetes? I definitely got some feedback at the doctors because I gained about 80 pounds, and I had some feedback about gaining too much weight, and I was like, I'm not eating like crazy. Like, this is just what my body's doing. So I'm going to do what my body's doing. I'm still walking. I'm still doing everything I can. So I'm just really going to keep going.
Absolutely. So talk to me about your labor and ultimately your delivery experience.
Yeah. So I was about 40 weeks and 2 days. So I was a little bit past my due date. No big deal there. But I went in for a typical OB appointment. And up until this point, everything had been fine. But I did have high blood pressure readings at both the beginning and the end of that appointment, which earned me a ticket to triage because I was already past my due date and now I'm having gestational hypertension. So when I got to the hospital, I had a lot of conversations with the OBs, and we made the informed decision to move forward with an induction of labor, mainly due to their concerns about gestational hypertension, but my concerns about how big my baby was. It's like, he's only going to grow bigger. And they were like, we actually don't care about that, but we do care about the blood pressure that seems to be, a problem at this point. So I moved forward. I felt very confident. I still feel confident in that decision. The benefits, in my opinion, outweighed the risks. And so I won't bore you with like the long, slow induction process for a first-time mom. But 2.5 days later, I was finally 10 centimeters. And so my OB came in, checked me, let me know I was 10. And she left to go get gowned up. And then I was in my room with my nurse on one side of my bed and my husband on the other. And I turned to my nurse and I said, I'm not feeling well. And she said, okay, that's like pretty typical for transition. I'll get you a bag to be sick in. And I said, nope, something is really wrong. And when she turned to look at the monitors, I started screaming that something was wrong with my heart. And seconds later, I went into cardiopulmonary arrest. So my heart stopped and I stopped breathing. A code blue was called for my room. As you can imagine, lots of medical personnel came kind of rushing in. They started CPR, and I was taken from that room into the OR across the hall. And they were able to deliver my son while CPR was happening on me. And they were able to get him delivered within 6 minutes of that code blue call, which is absolutely incredible. He did require resuscitation. He was born unresponsive. And so the NICU team was there and were able to resuscitate him very quickly. And then the attention really turned back toward me. And so CPR had continued on me until the end of that C-section where they were able to resuscitate me. And my OB, thankfully, at this point recognized I was likely having something called an amniotic fluid embolism, which is an incredibly rare obstetric complication. It is unfortunately still unpreventable, unpredictable, and often fatal. And so she was able to recognize that there's like a two-phase response in AFE. And one of those phases is what I had already experienced, kind of that like cardiopulmonary collapse. And then the other phase is something called DIC, which is disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. It's like a mouthful. But essentially your body throws a bunch of microclots, consumes all of your clotting factors, and you bleed out rapidly. And so she prophylactically placed like a Bakri balloon into my uterus, which helps to tampen out and stem the bleeding from the uterus. And she called for a massive transfusion protocol, which was just great foresight from her because I did develop DIC and I had a profound case of DIC. So I would go on to require 143 units of blood product. So that's the body's full blood volume being replaced about 14 times. And I would eventually require ECMO support, which is the highest form of life support, as well as a hysterectomy and the removal of my right ovary in order to stop some of the bleeding. So about 8 or 9 hours after all of those surgeries, I was eventually transferred from that hospital to the medical team at the hospital that they had transferred ECMO. So they had transferred ECMO in with my medical team to put me on VA ECMO. So then they transferred me back out so that that hospital could maintain my ECMO circuit. They told my family that I would probably be on ECMO for about 2 weeks, and that then I would be in the ICU for a few more weeks, down to mother baby for a few weeks, and then to rehab. And they weren't sure what my cognitive functioning would be given how long I was down for. I did suffer a brief second cardiac arrest due to blood loss. And so when I was transferred, I was being kept alive by ECMO, but my heart wasn't pumping effectively anymore. And they had to put in another device called an Impella into my heart to try to help it kind of offload and rest and recover in order for me to hopefully survive this event. And so with that timeline in mind, they did let my family know it would probably be like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But the Impella worked really well. And so just 2.5 days after my son was born, I was removed completely from ECMO and Impella support. I was extubated the day after that. And then I was able to meet my son for the first time while conscious on the 5th day after he was born. I don't remember it, but we have lots of beautiful videos and pictures of it. I learned what happened to me the next day from my team who came to that hospital. And then exactly 14 days after my son was born and my amniotic fluid embolism, I was actually discharged straight from that ICU to home to like become a mom, which is a wild way to become a mom for sure.
Kayleigh, it is so much that you've experienced, and you are a true miracle for those that like have not heard about this before.
Yeah.
The fact that you are here and speaking as you are and doing the work that you do is a true miracle and true testament to your team and how hard they work
Incredible.
and
Yes.
just the resiliency of your body. And then I think ultimately luck, because there's
So much luck.
so much luck, and like you said, it's a fatal thing for most women. And I
Yeah,
just really want to convey that, like that you're truly a miracle. And I'm just grateful that you're able to share this story, this insight, and create a lot more awareness around things that otherwise we're not told about this stuff, right? Like we're not
totally.
as
Yeah,
everyone talks about like an informed birth and we like go to classes, we learn how to breathe, we learn how to exercise, we do all of these things. And I think there's
absolutely.
just, and it can be overwhelming to try to take in all this information, but I think at the same time, just having a general understanding of all of the different variables that can influence birth is just part of that informed process, even if it feels like a buzzkill.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate you saying that. We were just talking in my community the other day about catastrophic birth planning and about how, like, if we're going to plan for birth, we should also consider um, certain things. Like, if so, I was pumped while unconscious in the ICU, and I have like mixed feelings about that choice. I think that everyone made the best choice with the information they had at the time, but that's because that's the information they had at the time.
Right.
Because I didn't think that I would be in the ICU on ECMO right after I had my son. So like had I thought about like, hey, if I'm unconscious, and I actually, what's so interesting about this conversation is that I probably would have said yes, but then it would have felt like a choice that I made
Right.
as opposed to people making a choice for me. Same with the hysterectomy. Of course, I wouldn't be here without it. Like, thank you. Like, would choose it over and over again. But the point is, I didn't get to make that choice.
Yeah. And I think that and it's like, yeah, the frustrating part of like so many women who experience birth is feeling like we had no say. Something was done to us. Even if ultimately it was the right move, it's like that loss of control. And I think when you come from more of that like athlete brain, I like to have control. I want to be prepared. I'm going to do everything, quote, right. And then to feel like now things are being done to you, it
Yes.
takes away part of your power. And I think we've been told that you step into your power when you become a mom, that it's this magical experience, that you've never been more feminine and like powerful and strong. And then when you enter motherhood, where you just get the shit kicked out of you, like it's the most disempowering experience. And you go into motherhood at a disadvantage because you're like, what just happened? The best day of my life has actually turned into one of the worst. And that's a shitty way to enter motherhood.
It is. And people will say, yeah, like, you've never felt more empowered. You never felt more magical. Like, I have never felt more broken
Yes.
than after. And that says nothing about my love for my child. And I want people to hear that for themselves.
Mhm.
Like, that set your experience of their birth and how devastating it was and how traumatic it was has nothing to do with how much you love your baby. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's important to remember too.
Yeah, it's a critical point, and I expressed the same things. It was never like about me not loving Cade. It just made the act of learning how to become a mom that much harder. You're starting at such a physical, mental, and emotional deficit
Yep.
when your expectation was the literally the opposite. And so now you're having to manage that expectation versus reality. Even though you're grateful, you're also, like you said, broken.
Absolutely. And that's hard to hold at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. I feel like there's so many questions and like sentiments from that piece. So you get home from the hospital, it's about 2 weeks after that catastrophic crazy event, and I assume that your family is just they're spinning, right? Like
Oh,
what
yeah.
was that experience like for your family, and then what was your support like coming home? What did that process look like for you?
Yeah. So everyone in my family was traumatized, unfortunately. The timing with which it happened was, I mean, it's never a great timing for an amniotic fluid embolism, but because I was at 10 centimeters, everyone was coming to the hospital to meet my baby. This was the first like baby on both sides of the family. And so everyone was coming. My parents were already there. We had just invited my mom in to the actual birth itself, which was not a part of the original plan. So she actually was in the waiting room with my dad telling him, hey, I'm going to be a while because I'm going to be back with Kayleigh and Steve in the actual delivery. And so she was in the waiting room with my dad when the code blue was called for my room. And so she saw the way the like waiting room is it's like right on the hallway that connects L&D to everything else. And so she saw all the people running from outside L&D, like the critical care professionals, into L&D. And she at one point tried to like get out of the waiting room, and the receptionist pushed her back in and was like, you can't come out right now. And she was like, you don't understand, it's my daughter. And she's like, I'm sorry, you can't come out. And so then eventually, once they took me to the OR, they let my mom go back, but my dad stayed in the waiting room because people were coming. So people were about to show up thinking they were going to meet my son. And so my mom went back and she found Steve, my husband, just like pacing the room with his hands on his head, saying, please just save my wife, like over and over again, which always breaks my heart a little bit. And so my mom was like, what the hell happened? And Steve was like, I don't know. Because, I mean, he has no idea what he just witnessed. And so then one by one, like my best friend showed up to the waiting room, and she describes it as like, I like walk in and I like saw your dad crying in the corner of a waiting room, sitting next to a woman that I didn't know, who was the hospital chaplain. And so then my dad gets up and hugs her crying. And it's just basically like, Kayleigh and the baby, like, we don't know. We have no idea. We don't know who's like sick. Like, we don't know what happened. We don't know who it is, if it's Kayleigh, if it's the baby. And so then my dad went back to the room. And so then Jesse, my best friend, was in charge of telling my brother, who just came with his wife, again, like with all their like coffee and Starbucks for everyone, like excited to see the new baby, the nephew. And like, then Jesse had to tell them that like there was a code blue called, they don't know what's going on. And so then they got several more updates, which were just not good updates. The one during my second cardiac arrest, my OB went to my family and said, we're doing everything that we can, but we can't stop the bleeding and we need you to pray. And then like left and went back to the OR. And so that was the point that my family was like pretty sure that I was not going to make it out of this alive. And then they all got moved to a conference room so they could be together. Like more people got there, like my husband's mom, my husband's sister. And so they moved them all to a conference room so they could update them like together outside of the room and closer to the OR. And around 4:00, when I was having my hysterectomy surgery, but it was unfortunate. My husband had to sign for the hysterectomy, which is just like a terrible position to be in. And no one had seen the baby. So the baby was born, my son Callahan was born at 12:52, and it was 4 p.m. and no one had seen the baby except for nurses, which I fully understand. My husband's argument was that he didn't want to leave the place in the hospital where he could be the closest to me. And my mom and his mom kind of like gently encouraged that like I would want someone to see the baby. And essentially if he wasn't going to, they probably were going to, because someone had to go see the baby. And so he eventually went up and saw the baby. And there's really sad pictures and videos of that, but I'm really grateful that they took them because I couldn't be there. And then what ended up happening was that when we all got home, everyone was traumatized. I was still very sick. So I had 4 abdominal surgeries in 5 days, and I had been left open that whole time in between so that they could keep going back in. So I couldn't really I couldn't lift my son. I couldn't do anything. And my parents had to live with us for 6 weeks, which was like, they're the most amazing humans. I get so much support from them. But my husband's idea of like our brand new family of 3 was not with my parents living with us. No matter how great your in-laws are, you don't want them living with you. So that created a lot of tension, especially because, again, all 3 of them were traumatized and dealing with it in their own ways. And I very quickly became, I'm a youngest child and I'm the only girl. So I became very like daughter. Like I slid right into the daughter role because I was sick and felt helpless and did not want to be a mom at that point. And so I think that was hard for my husband to see as well. We were both traumatized and dealing with it very differently. And so that's one of the hardest things coming home from a trauma like this, is that everyone kind of expects, and we expected to kind of sail off into the sunset because we survived something that we shouldn't have. But we were so angry and sad. And I felt like I wasn't allowed to be. angry and sad because people don't get to survive this. And how dare I essentially have any other feelings except for gratitude. And like for people listening, I was a therapist at the time. Like I knew better. Like cognitively, I knew that I was allowed to have all of my feelings, and I still couldn't handle that and couldn't like kind of see through the trauma to recognize that at first. Thankfully, support wise, I knew that I was messed up, that this was horrific. And so I got into therapy the week I was discharged from the hospital with someone who specializes in perinatal trauma. And that was life-changing for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's an incredible move to like have that kind of insight. Obviously, your professional background helps, but just knowing that, we recommend postpartum like therapy in general, but especially with somebody who understands trauma, really
Yes.
understand like trauma and motherhood and those two going together, because we like to separate them because putting them
Mm-hmm.
together feels messy and it feels wrong. So having that professional guidance who can have those hard conversations and provide specific support is so key. So I'm glad that you mentioned that so people know that's even a thing.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's so important. And having both the expertise in trauma and also perinatal mental health is so important, which is why that's what I do now. I'm a perinatal trauma therapist. I have both of those backgrounds because you're right. We do a lot of perinatal mental health, a lot of like PMADs, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, but trauma is like a bit of a different beast.
Yeah.
And you need someone who is trained in that.
And I think in general, motherhood and like postpartum, it changes your brain chemistry in general. And then when you add the layer of trauma on top of that, I've told my husband multiple times and in therapy, like I was never the same. Who I was, my brain, and it like I became more myself again through years, but like that fundamentally changed me. And a
Absolutely.
lot of women love to say, like, it changed me for the better. And yes, like you really zoom out, you can say, like, I love this version of me now. But there's so much grief attached to what we like missed out on in what should have been really precious moments and honestly precious years of our motherhood that we just lost to depression, anxiety, grief, trauma, all of these things, despite our efforts to try, right? It's not like we weren't trying to be present and trying to be loving and trying to be motherly, but it can be really hard when like the grief cloud is just kind of there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say I didn't need the trauma. People are like, "Oh, look what you've made out of it. Look where you are." And I'm like,
Right.
in spite of it. Not because of it, in spite of it. And I will always I'm not a like this happened for a reason. Like there's, you know, I feel like I survived in the way that I did for a reason, I guess, but I don't jive with the like your trauma made you stronger.
Right.
No, it made everything so much harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, in spite of, like you are here
Mhm.
in spite of the cards you were dealt, and you
Totally.
have built a life with those cards. And I think
Yep.
that's the honor, like the really honorable part.
Yeah, that's all we can do, right?
Yeah. So coming home, you're in therapy, your brain is having to process so much. Your body is having to recover from significant surgeries. Nevertheless, the normal postpartum recovery of like just everything our bodies go through having a baby. What did your physical process of recovery look like?
Yeah, so I wish this would have gone differently. So I think because I do, so the one place that, we talk about just because you're the most fit you've ever been, it doesn't mean your birth's going to go the way you want it to, unfortunately, right? Like that's what happened for me. The one thing I will credit my ability to stay fit, to be fit, to have had kind of this lifetime of being at a very competitive level, playing soccer, I do think it played a role in my recovery.
Yeah.
The only issue with that So like, again, everyone expected me to go to rehab. And then by like day 9, I was like walking stairs in the ICU. And I think what I also want people to recognize is that's not because I was like, oh, I'm just going to like fight through and push through and like suck it up. Like that's less about what it is and more about just like my body at that point, my pain tolerance felt high enough that it like wasn't super painful. Whereas before I couldn't even like move. And so it's not a product of like pulling myself up and like sucking it up. I don't really love that mentality in this state of things. But I think that had to do with just like the level of fit that my body was at. And that is exactly what my anesthesiologist said when I ended up walking out of the ICU 14 days after. He was like, youth does a whole lot for the body when you're looking at a critical event like this. And so the reason I don't like how things went is because I essentially like didn't meet the needs of physical therapy inpatient rehab. I had no PT at all. So I just like went home and was able to be a lot more mobile than people expected. Like they were like, okay, so you're only going to walk up the stairs like once a day to go to bed and walk down the stairs in the morning once a day. I was like walking up and down the stairs fine. So like that, sure, it was like a little painful, but there was no issue with that. So because there was no issue with my daily activities, like I was able to shower myself by the time I got home, we just all like pretended like it didn't exist. I never got PT. And the physical recovery was hard because a nurse had to come every day to pack parts of my incision that did not close, which is disgusting and not fun. So I had home health come every day.
It was on top of the trauma you'd already experienced.
Yes. And then 6 months postpartum, unsurprisingly to anyone, because again, so when they opened me for the initial XLAP after exploratory laparotomy, after I had my C-section, it's like a T. So it's like all the way, what's it called, vertically across my abdomen. They left that open for 4 days with a wound vac in place. And so as we see with postpartum patients, like just like diastasis recti in general is a nightmare, especially with an 11-pound baby. So I developed a massive incisional hernia to the point where like I wanted nothing to do with getting another surgery. Like I was like, absolutely not. And my trauma surgeon was like, yeah, so I can see your intestines digesting your food. This is not a choice. You have to get this taken care of. So that was the biggest hurdle physically, is that I had to get another major abdominal surgery exactly a year. It was the same week my son was born that I had to get surgery in the same hospital to repair that hernia, which was another open surgery. So, and then I was in the hospital. It was COVID, so no one could come with me. So I was just in the hospital for 2 days by myself.
That's so unfair.
It was, we survived. It was way less terrible than I thought it was going to be. So it was a good moment. But so the physical recovery was just mostly that and a lot of health anxiety. Like every little thing that came up, I was like, okay, well, clearly I'm dying again. So I need to go to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it would be so hard to not assume that when you feel like, what did I do? Like, why me? And even like feelings of like shame or like,
Totally.
I don't know, just the myriad of like, why me? Why did this happen?
Yeah. Like why, like essentially, and I have a pretty healthy relationship with this now, to be honest. So I'm a little bit maybe more crass than people would be. Cause I think it's like, it's not funny at all, but it's like a little bit ironic, I would say, that we get these feelings a lot of, my body failed me. My body like failed me, my baby. And people in certain communities will talk about like how your body was made to give birth, which I have feelings about, but
I hate that.
That would always, same. For people listening, we hate that. Your body was also made to see, and people need glasses. Your body was also made to like, produce insulin, and some people have diabetes. Anyway, so my like AFE is essentially your immune system, your body attacking itself because it comes into contact with amniotic fluid, fetal material, right? It's like this huge immune system response to that. We don't know why it happens to certain people and not others. But essentially, like my body attacked itself because I was pregnant. Like you can't get much closer to your body not being made to give birth than that. And so I like struggled with that for like why did my body fail so miserably? And I think I've gotten to the point where I'm like I hear that, like have that, hold that, grieve that. And also like your body like kept your baby alive for 6 minutes when your heart wasn't beating anymore. Like your body survived all of these insane things. Like I think we could like give your body a gold star for this one.
Yeah. Like there's got to be layers of gratitude in there too, because you are
It's
a
both.
miracle and so was your baby.
Absolutely. He's a little chunker. I swear his extra meat maybe helped him survive that scenario.
I love that. So you had the hernia surgery and when did you start sharing about this online? Like when did that, I know that you said it was part of your healing process too. And same, that's why we have so much in common here.
Totally.
I feel like it was starting this accidental business that helped me really process what had happened and like gain wisdom through writing, through talking, through coaching people and like kind of refining my actual feelings versus just the ones in my head. And
Yes.
what did that process look like for you in terms of like the creation process?
Yeah. So I actually started sharing, and it was really just an outlet to like, hey, like no one talks about these kind of stories. All I see are like beautiful, wonderful, like water births at home. And no one's talking about like when everything kind of goes wrong. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to share my story. That's it. And I actually started that 6 months postpartum. And I just like kind of did that for maybe like a year without like, it was just like a thing. I didn't feel strongly about it. I wasn't like an influencer in any way. I was just like, here's my story. Like, oh, people kind of connect to it a little bit. And then I realized after a year that people were really hungry for like a little bit more of the support piece. So I have this like clinical skill set as a therapist, and then I have this like lived experience, and I ended up deciding to integrate them. And that's when things really started to click for like other people feeling like seen and heard through some of the things that I started to post.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was, how long ago was this, by the way?
So I had my son in July 2019. So I would have started this in January 2020, right before COVID hit.
Yeah. And so through starting to share and creating community, did you start to feel like you were turning a physical and mental corner? Like, was that a part of your process or did you feel like they were somewhat separate?
That's a really good question. I feel like they were somewhat separate. I don't know. I think that we don't maybe talk enough about the impact of community. We're all about, listen, I'm a therapist. I'm all about therapy. Like we gotta get people like helping with their triggers. Like we gotta help people figure out their window of tolerance, grow that a little bit, like EMDR, IFS, I'm all about it. And I also think we downplay the role of community sometimes and connection because isolation is one of the hardest parts about birth trauma. So I can't say that it didn't help me. Like, of course, finding community definitely helped me. I would say about 6 months, I started to bond with my son. It took a while. And then like the whole first year kind of sucked. It was kind of awful. And the anniversary was hard because I went back to the hospital and it was just like hard. And then I would say like 18 months, I felt like my first glimmer of like my head a little bit above the water. And then from there, it felt like, you know, you would ebb and flow a little bit, but it has felt like a pretty steady, slow kind of trek forward. And for me, a large part of that, which is what I think made it last a lot like longer, maybe, is like the first year and a half, I could not touch the grief of not being able to have any more kids. Like that was like, no. So then that took another like year 2, year 3, year 4, real griefy. And I would say just now, my son is 6 now. I don't care as much. Like I'm really happy with an only child, and I didn't think I'd ever feel that way. And so that has been like a newer development, and that's 6 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard when you're in a community. Just naturally, we as a mother, you end up being around mothers and you hear their stories, you hear their experiences. And during I call it the dark seasons, it was so hard to be around other moms. Like I couldn't go to
Totally.
support groups because I was
No.
annoyed. My
Yes.
baby was crying. I was having a hard time breastfeeding. I felt like I was falling apart and like not made to be a mom. And then all these other women were acting like it was this magical thing. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Why can I not just like hack myself to like just be freaking happy that you're here, that your baby is alive, that you're fine, like you're here. Why can't you just get it together? And I was so frustrated, but then I was so annoyed with these moms and I couldn't relate to like anyone. They were too fluffy and girly and I just was so out of place.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Mom groups are tough because they are wonderful spaces where people should connect and where people should be able to complain about like the little things or, lament about the things that are bothering them. And almost every birth trauma survivor who has ever been in one of those groups has really struggled to relate. And that's no one's fault. It's just the fact of the matter. And so you have to find a community who gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where this community was born out of, is like, I just wanted people who like could show up and understand what you meant when you said that you love your baby, but the day they were born was the worst day of your life.
Yeah.
Without judgment, without shame. And you could just like feel validated in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having that community of people who can truly keep it real and like validate that motherhood is a beautiful experience and it comes with really brutal moments.
Yeah.
I had a post go viral a while that was like, every mother experiences something that's fucked up at some point. Like you just don't know what it's going to be or the severity of like how fucked it is, but you
Totally.
experience something at some point in your motherhood journey that just humbles you. And instead of trying to pretend otherwise, I think honest motherhood, honest conversations like this, being able to acknowledge the variety of experiences, whether you can relate or not. Frankly, I hope no one can relate to this episode, but I do know that many, many women do. I would love for you not to relate to this episode, right? But
Absolutely.
the reality is a lot of women do, regardless of what your trauma looks like. Like that looks
Yeah.
different for everyone.
Which is a good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I'd like to bring it up in almost every episode or every time I share my story. I want people to know this is like one tiny example of a very specific kind
Mhm.
of birth trauma. And, right now we're at 1 in 3. So 1 in 3 pregnant individuals feel traumatized by their birth experience. That is over 1 million individuals in the US each year who feel traumatized by their birth experience. It's a ton. And that birth trauma can look many different ways. A lot of birth trauma is related to like a stripping of your dignity, a lack of respect, feeling unheard, feeling unseen, lack of autonomy, lack of informed consent. Like a lot of birth trauma is relational in that way to your team.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of call that out too, that birth trauma is subjective. It is anything that overwhelms the nervous system's ability to cope and causes ongoing distress.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just that sentiment of why didn't anyone tell me? Like that's a thought that trolls so many women. I work with them more on the other side of like, why didn't I know about diastasis and what could happen to my abs or pelvic organ prolapse? Or like, why does my vagina feel like something's wrong with it and I'm peeing myself all the time? Like, or I feel like I can't exercise and be myself again. Why didn't anyone tell me that this could happen or my body could feel like this or mentally and emotionally I'd feel like that? Or there could have been a really like horrific birth experience. Why didn't anyone tell me? And I think that's the part that's a question that silently just trolls so many women.
It does. It's an interesting phenomenon that I've had a lot of thoughts on lately, actually. Because I think there's this interesting cycle where people are like, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me. And then they kind of get to which I don't blame them. And they get to the other side and they're like, why didn't anyone tell me?
Yep. That was me. Exactly.
Fair.
Yep.
And like, I like there's, it's so hard. And this is what I've always said about pregnant people who come across my space, who have never been pregnant before, who have never had a baby before.
Right.
What I want them to take from that, I do not want them to sit in it. I do not want them to, unless they for some reason want to, I don't want them to like bathe themselves in the stories of trauma. What I want them to know is that birth trauma exists. If it happens to them, they're not crazy, and that there's a space that can support them.
Yep.
And they know that it exists. Like, that's my goal. Because people will be like, well, I don't want to know about X, Y, and Z. That's your choice, honestly.
Yeah.
That's your choice. But it's hard to end up on the other side having no idea that this was even an option, which is why the catastrophic birth planning is a really interesting way to get people to not sitting in specific trauma stories, but just thinking about, hey, if I end up in an ICU, what do I want out of that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, I can almost hear the objections to that of like, well, you shouldn't manifest that kind of birth or give energy to that. I mean, because we know that this is a big part of the birth community is almost like positive self-talking yourself into birth. But we know that there are so many variables that influence birth and outcome and whatnot. And I think it can be hard because, of course, we want to think positively. Of course, we want to go into this feeling empowered. And also, like, feeling empowered is also feeling informed. And like that's but it feels like it should not be mutually exclusive. But a lot of women and a lot of birth professionals and fitness professionals and doctors kind of treat it that way.
I always say, if I had the power to manifest an amniotic fluid embolism, I would be much more important and powerful than I am right now.
Yeah.
Like, the manifesting stuff I am all for practicing, affirmations and feeling empowered and doing the things that make you feel empowered, but with the idea that, exactly like you said, information is empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think in both the birth and the fitness communities, there is a lot of dogma attached to motherhood and what is right and what is best. And I try to tell everyone like that is just, it is so relative. It is so individual. There's, again, I'm going to keep saying this, just so many variables that influence these experiences, outcomes. Like, your fitness will always be a benefit, just not a guarantee. But I think that can be a hard message to convey when, again, a lot of these communities are like, well, if you're fit enough and if you're really healthy and if you think positively and if you do these breathing exercises and attend these classes and get into these positions, then you can almost like out hack the process.
The Venn diagram, and being someone who's a part of this, I feel like I can say this, the Venn diagram between some parts of fitness communities and perfectionistic tendencies are like almost a complete circle. So it makes so much sense that there would want to be so much.
I just love that you said that.
And listen, I am a part of that. I lean into that so much. Like, but I can just see the grip for control happening. And then that whole, like, the dogma comes from, if we believe that if our kids get X number of, let me give a personal example. Baby-led weaning. Okay. I did baby-led weaning. For some reason, this is some like weird space that I was in. I can't even like articulate it. Like, I don't understand where my brain was at, but like, I decided that like it was baby-led weaning or bust. Like, no, like there were all kinds of rules I read on like one random Facebook group, and all of a sudden, like, I couldn't be giving any mesh pouches, like no pureed foods at all. Like, it was this like very strict, and that's kind of what it reminds me of. Like, why didn't I just like do some baby-led weaning with some like pouches and purees? Like, what was the big deal?
I know. Well, I did the same thing with breastfeeding. And in hindsight, I'm like, it's because I wanted to have control of one freaking thing in my motherhood that I felt like I could get right.
Totally.
You're like, nothing else has gone
Relatable.
right. I lost control in every other capacity. And I made myself absolutely neurotic with breastfeeding. And I feel like we do. You almost like try to find a way to redeem a small part of yourself.
Yes, it's so protective. There's
Yeah,
nothing, again, when I'm talking about this, it's not in a shaming way. Like this is all
right.
just a part of our grip to get some control back. And breastfeeding after birth trauma is a whole nother conversation that we do have some interesting research on. We typically see kind of like one or the other. Either it's like the person can't breastfeed, chooses not, whatever, after birth trauma, and it's like this big, massive grief on top of all of this other grief, just like another grief in a long line of griefs, if you will. And then the people that are able to breastfeed and like, again, you can pry it out of my dead cold hands because it's the one thing that my body can do right is often the sentiment after birth trauma. And there's that exact feeling like you were describing.
Yeah. I mean, and it's crazy that, like you said, like we actually have research that supports this, not just our lived experiences, but
Yep.
I just hope those that are listening that can unfortunately relate feel really validated by what you're saying. I know that I do. And this is 12 years later and in a whole other baby that I was able to have later, but you don't
Yeah.
forget how you felt then. And it stays with your heart, even though like there is healing, there is growth, and there's like a deeper
Yeah.
appreciation for motherhood now, like how I value my relationship with Cade at 12 I feel is because I know what it was like. Like I so desperately wanted to love him. I so desperately wanted to be a good mom for him. And I appreciate our relationship in such a deep way that I don't think I would have had that level of appreciation for and protectiveness of if he had entered the world under a different circumstance. And that's been the
Absolutely.
beautiful thing to see as he's gotten older is I really value him and his life and our relationship and like who he's becoming. It is so deep and it is so beautiful to see him grow up.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful sentiment. I would say there's so as we allow ourselves to sit with the grief more, to like genuinely feel it, we actually make room for the joy and the gratitude.
Yeah.
It's not like something we can really choose, as people like to say. It is more about first sitting with the grief and the devastation of what happened and what you lost to start to make room next to that for more of that joy and gratitude.
I love that. Kayleigh, tell us a little bit more about your work, your community, what you've created, and how people can work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at the birth trauma underscore mama. And there I'm just sharing all kinds of kind of supportive messaging. I have a podcast, the Birth Trauma Mama podcast. We release 2 episodes a week. One is an educational episode, one is a listener story. And then I own a private practice that specializes in perinatal trauma, where we see clients in both Pennsylvania, Florida, and soon to be New Jersey. So if you're looking for someone who does both perinatal mental health and trauma, we are definitely it.
That's so amazing. Well, congratulations on the goodness that you've created for so many women to feel seen and heard when they otherwise don't. And they likely feel lost in motherhood and lonely and guilty. You've created like a really healing space, even for me to stumble across you, like, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And I was like, God, this is so helpful even now where I feel like this doesn't like live rent free in my head all the time
Right.
anymore, but it's still like, it's very validating. And I just appreciate the space that you've created for women. And I really appreciate you having this conversation and sharing so openly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And the space that you've built is also incredible in equal ways, right? It's like that mix of like the physical and emotional coming together for women and postpartum individuals after some of the most difficult times in their lives. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practice Brave podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review and help us spread the work we are doing to improve the overall information and messaging in the fitness industry and beyond. Now, if you are pregnant and you are looking for a trustworthy exercise program to follow, I have you covered. The Pregnant Athlete Training Program is a well-rounded program for pregnancy with workouts for each week that are appropriate for your changing body. That's 36 weeks of workouts, 3 to 4 workouts each week, and tons of guidance on exercise strategy. We also have an at-home version of that program. If you are postpartum and you're looking for an exercise program to follow, the 8-week postpartum athlete training program would be a really great way to help bridge the gap between rehab and the fitness you actually want to do. From there, we have the Practice Brave Fitness program, which is an ongoing strength and conditioning program where you get new workouts each week and have a lot of guidance from myself and my co-coach, Heather Osby. This is the only way that I'm really offering ongoing coaching at this point in time. If you have ever considered becoming a certified pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, I would love to have you join us. Pregnancy and Postpartum Athleticism is a self-paced online certification course that will up-level your coaching skills and help connect the dots between pelvic health and long-term athletic performance, especially during pregnancy and postpartum. Become who you needed and become who your online and local community needs by becoming a certified pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. Thank you again for listening to the Practice Brave podcast. I appreciate you. And please help me continue spreading this messaging, this information, and this work.